From Darwin, Australia, live by satellite across Southeast Asia, this is the Australia Television News.
Good evening, I'm Rosemary. Tonight, the military strikes back against Muslim rebels in the southern Philippines. The Japanese yen reaches new highs against the American dollar, and the latest revelations on Japan's Aum Supreme Truth sect. In the southern Philippines, running battles have been reported between troops and Muslim rebels suspected of attacking a town earlier this week. About 50 people died in Tuesday's attack on the mainly Christian town of Ipil.
Philippine troops continued to pour into Mindanao as fierce clashes broke out between government soldiers and the Muslim guerrillas. Reports say the latest firefights claimed the lives of at least 11 people, with the government soldiers at times coming within a few hundred metres of the guerrillas.
The group, these bandits who attacked or burned Ipil, is estimated to be between 150 to 200. As of now, accordingly, they are being divided into 3 groups, but we are not very sure of how many men per group.
The government says the rebels are at times using hostages seized from Tuesday's attack on Ipil as human shields. 5 of those killed in the latest fighting are said to have been hostages. Thousands of civilians are reported to have fled from remote mountain villages to escape the fighting, which has been blamed on the Abu Sayyaf Muslim fundamentalist group. A flag belonging to the Abu Sayyaf group was found in the Ipil vicinity after the attack. The renewed bloodshed on Mindanao led Philippine President Fidel Ramos to declare a state of emergency in the area, and he sacked the commanding officer of the military's southern region.
Firefighters in Hong Kong today had to contend with a massive fire in one of the British colony's most densely populated areas. The blaze broke out in a commercial building in the Kwang Tong district and rapidly spread to nearby residential flats. Hundreds of people had to be rescued from their homes as the fire proved difficult to control. 2 people were taken to hospital for treatment for burns, with their condition now said to be satisfactory. Firemen wearing masks for protection against smoke and poisonous fumes eventually got the blaze under control, and an investigation is underway into its cause. Japan's faith in its intellectual elite has been rocked by revelations that some of the country's best brains are active in the Aum Supreme Truth cult. The high-tech doomsday sect is believed responsible for the Tokyo nerve gassing, which killed 10 people. Australia Television's Walter Hamilton reports.
When Japanese police raided the Aum Supreme Truth, they found a nation within a nation, with its own science department, running an advanced chemical research facility and turning out inventions such as electronic headgear for implanting the brain waves of cult leader Shoko Asahara. Elite doctors, chemists, computer experts from Japan's top universities, serving a guru with a doomsday message.
They lost faith in the things technological, so that's why they come into this group. But suddenly the guru told them, you can be useful.
Many were recruited as students, like Aum's media spokesman, a former government rocket scientist.
We like to have a foundation of civilization so that we can, recover civilization after the Great Destruction. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Aum's appeal to intellectuals is being blamed on an education system that relies on rote learning, turning out disillusioned technocrats devoid of ordinary judgment. Some commentators also talk of a generation that's lost faith in words.
The method of expression, new type of method, is the system of chemical weapons, or the sarin gas and these kind of things. So terrorism is a way of expression, is a way of communication.
It's a sobering discovery for a nation which almost worships academic excellence to find their best and brightest speaking a language of alienation and destruction. As the full story behind Tokyo's nerve gas horror unfolds, it becomes not just a threat to public security, but a challenge to this society's basic beliefs.
World currency markets enter the weekend in turmoil after the Japanese yen broke a record spanning 50 years, reaching a new high against the American dollar. The US dollar is now trading just below 84 yen, down a massive 17% on its value just 3 months ago.
Aggressive selling on world markets from New York to here in Tokyo helped drive the dollar down. Currency traders in the key Asian banks spent much of the day buying up the yen over the greenback's fall. By week's close, the dollar had slipped 3.5% against the yen, totalling a massive 17% so far for 1995. Yet Japan's central bank is holding out on pressure to cut its official discount rates. That's at odds with public comments on the issue from the Japanese government, with cabinet ministers openly squabbling over how much the government should intervene to counter the surge of the yen. Conformity, though, from economists, who predict still more fine-tuning to a supplementary budget due out with the new business year on the 1st of April. Given its inability to control the overheating currency, the government may move to release the fresh rescue package as early as next week.
Continuing Friday's market news, and stocks in Tokyo ended lower amid concern for the yen's rise. Hong Kong shares firmed slightly in directionless trade, the Hang Seng gaining 52 points. Singapore's shares lost ground, the STI shedding 21 points. A late surge in overseas buying propelled Australia's market to a 4-month high. The country's dollar slipped against the US currency, with Hong Kong gold and Australian bullion following the trend. Reports from Taiwan say President Lee Teng-hui is to announce a major change in his country's policy towards China this weekend. Taipei newspapers say Mr. Lee will offer to normalise relations with Beijing so that the two sides can work together towards reunification. China has been told in no uncertain terms its activities in the South China Sea are unacceptable. In an unprecedented move, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, expressed concern about the disputed Spratly Islands issue. Senior ASEAN officials met with Chinese representatives in China this week to discuss the problem. It's the first time that ASEAN has expressed as a united force its fears over China's activities around the volatile Spratly Islands.
The expressions of concern were made in unprecedented in terms that were unusually forceful.
Philippines Foreign Vice Minister Rodolfo Severino attended the meeting of senior ASEAN officials in Hangzhou this week to express his country's concern. Tension rose in February this year when Manila accused Beijing of building a naval support installation on a reef that the Philippines claims as its own. Manila filed a protest over the structures, which China claimed were for fishermen. The Philippines recently removed Chinese signs from the Spratlys and detained Chinese fishermen thought to be using explosives in the area.
They light it and then just give them enough time to get away from the dynamite.
Vice Minister Severino said China expressed willingness at the meeting to undertake cooperative ventures in the South China Sea.
They also insisted that further discussions of cooperative undertakings and over other matters related to the South China Sea dispute be conducted on a bilateral basis.
The Spratlys are a cluster of small islands believed to be rich in oil. They're claimed in whole or in part by Vietnam, China, Taiwan, Brunei, Malaysia and the Philippines. The snap general election called by Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad this week will be held on April the 24th and 25th. Dr Mahathir, whose National Front coalition has been in power since independence from Britain in 1957, is expected to be returned to power in the new parliament. Police in New York have arrested another 4 people as an investigation continues into the kidnapping of Asian immigrants at the John F. Kennedy Airport. They're also investigating possible links with the trade in illegal immigrants into the United States.
New York police arrested and charged these men after the latest attempt to kidnap an inbound passenger at JFK Airport failed. A 19-year-old Chinese woman was set upon shortly after an early morning arrival from Los Angeles in full view of her brother and friends.
Information that we have is that they said to her, come with us. And at that point, her brother, realizing what was happening, he intervened along with his friends, trying to stop that.
Police have now arrested 10 people. The latest four, aged 19 to 26, were charged with attempted kidnapping, robbery and assault, and if convicted, face a maximum prison term of 25 years to life. The arrests coincide with a State Department report of Chinese being smuggled into the USA in well-organised rackets from a staging point in Central America. It's claimed many cross into California by land, then fly from Los Angeles to New York. Police say the gangs have been lured to New York's JFK by its reputation as a smuggling hub for illegal aliens, and are now also targeting legitimate immigrants.
The first genocide trials in Rwanda have been postponed. 6 men were due to answer charges that they took part in the killing of more than 1 million of their fellow Rwandans. However, the judge has ruled the prosecution needs more time to prepare its case. As Rwanda mourns the first anniversary of the massacre, more than 30,000 people are behind bars in the country's jails.
From outside, it would scarcely draw a second glance. But these fortified walls contain Rwanda's biggest problem and potentially the key to reconciliation: Kigali Central Prison. It was built to house 1,500 and now holds 8,000, accused of mass murder and genocide. Each of these men has been denounced by at least 3 witnesses as participants in a frenzy of killing in which 1 million people died in a matter of weeks. They are awaiting trial for crimes for which the penalty is death. Their jailers make no apology for their living conditions, and they make no protest. They are fed once a day. They sleep in shifts because there is not enough room to lie down, and most live in an open courtyard, battered by the unrelenting African sun. They all protest their innocence. On Rwanda's death row, there are already 30,000 genocide suspects. There are more than 1,000 new arrests every week. It is a judicial backlog of impossible proportions.
In Zimbabwe, President Robert Mugabe has renewed his attacks on the country's whites ahead of elections this weekend, warning of a crackdown after the vote. Mugabe said elitist, secretive racial clubs would no longer be tolerated. Zimbabwe's 100,000 whites, about 1/3 of pre-independence numbers, make up just 1% of the country's population.
Robert Mugabe is the unchallenged leader of what is close to a one-party state in Zimbabwe. He holds 147 of 150 seats in Parliament, and the latest elections are tipped to see that stranglehold tighten even further. The president's near monopoly on power raises questions over just how democratic Zimbabwe's elections now are. But those concerns are dismissed by President Mugabe.
The people are going to vote. Nobody is forcing anybody to vote in any direction. Yeah. So, yes, it will be democratic vote. Why not? As long as people vote freely. Yeah.
The white population now is barely 100,000, about 1/3 of the pre-independence numbers. But for those who stayed, life is comfortable. And even for farmers who are threatened by the government's Land Acquisition Act, President Mugabe now enjoys guarded support.
While many of them might have reservations about some of the things that he does, almost every one of them would accept that he is by far the best leader that we could have under the circumstances at the moment.
For Zimbabwe's citizens, the first 15 years of Robert Mugabe's rule have produced mixed blessings. Economic dislocation came with 10 years of socialist experimentation, and they've been followed over the past 5 years by policies of economic rationalism which have removed assistance from the most needy. For his next term, President Mugabe is promising to revive abandoned welfare programs while sustaining economic growth.
The leader of the new Russian-backed government in Chechnya has offered an amnesty to anti-Russian fighters, but the offer is likely to go unheeded by the thousands of Chechens still locked in battle with Russian troops. After 4 months of conflict, refugees are now returning to the capital, Grozny, which is firmly in Russian hands. But many people haven't been able to escape the war and have faced a bitter struggle for survival.
When the Russians bombarded Grozny at the New Year, the entire staff of the Chernarechia Home for Old People and Invalids fled, abandoning the patients. For 3 months, Maleka, herself one of the invalids, cooked for them, changed them and comforted them as the bombs and shells poured down and they lay in sub-zero temperatures, expecting to die. When the Russians finally overran this area, their tanks smashed down the gates of the home and made the main wing uninhabitable. In the gardens, Malika showed me the graves she had to dig for 30 patients who died in the last 3 months, not of battle wounds, but of cold, hunger and sheer terror. Malika is a Chechen. She lost her only son last month in a Russian bomb attack, but she spared no effort to help her fellow residents, most of whom are Russians.
We need help. We need a generator to give us light and heat. We need bed linen, blankets, clothes, slippers.
The 38 residents who survived live now in unimaginable squalor. Meals are concocted from meagre rations supplied occasionally by the Russian army. Many patients have lice, most of them wheeze and cough, lying on damp, stinking sheets. The residents all have different ways of coping with the distress. Valentina shows me photographs of her family. This is me and my husband in 1937, she says, escaping for 10 minutes from the awful reality of 1995.
A new voice is being heard at the Berlin Environment Conference. Some of the world's largest insurers have appealed to governments to cut greenhouse gas emissions. They claim they're facing billions of dollars in payouts because of the increase in environmental disasters.
Environmentalists voicing their interpretation of discussions inside the conference centre. Unusual symbolism, a mock steamroller portraying the onward march of climate change. With 1 day remaining, there is no consensus over which countries should be involved in reducing their climate-altering greenhouse gas emissions. The conference has cost $24 million to stage, and the conclusion may be a stalemate. So has it been worthwhile? The next few hours will tell if some sort of agreement can be reached by governments, many of which have been primarily concerned not so much with the global threat, but with protecting national self-interest. The frequency of natural disasters was the focus of one last appeal for reductions. The head of one of Europe's largest insurance companies told the conference that between 1987 and 1993, the world had experienced 16 environment-related catastrophes costing a total of $52 billion. Only 2 had nothing to do with climate.
Major world-class reinsurers report that the size and frequency of climate-related catastrophes is increasing on a scale not previously experienced.
Whether this is enough to get agreement for action should be known by tomorrow.
Meantime, the Australian scientists who identified the virus which killed Queensland horse trainer Vic Rail and 13 thoroughbreds last year have warned of the possibility of further outbreaks. The scientists have won international acclaim for tracking down the virus, which is related to measles and distemper. They're now calling on the racing industry to fund further research.
It was a sign of modern times, the emergence of another mystery virus that first killed racehorses and then their trainer, Vic Rail. The CSIRO and the Queensland Health Department will receive international recognition next week, with a photo of the morbillivirus on the front cover of the prestigious Science magazine.
Yeah, that's rather pleasing, it really is.
But while it has now been eliminated from Australia's horse population, more research is needed to find the source of the virus.
And I think it's important for the horse industry to come in behind that plan now and provide some resources for us to do the work properly.
Scientists suspect the virus has come from a native animal, but they're mystified about why it took so long after European settlement to strike. It's taken 200 years for the virus to infect horses and humans, and while it's a low probability, there is a fear that it could spread to other animals.
We don't believe in spontaneous generation or just a virus popping out of the blue. It's got to be living and hiding somewhere in our animal or bird population.
The virus forced the United States to ban the import of Australian horses, a reputation only restored by quick expert action.
That's very important from an international viewpoint because other countries do expect us that we are able to handle these sorts of animal disease incidents.
Any further outbreak could now be controlled, but its potential to damage our trade is not being taken lightly.
To sport now, and defending champion Rosemary Olafable is one of 3 joint first-round leaders in the US Masters at Augusta. He fired a 6 under 66 along with lefty Phil Mickelson and South African David Frost. 1 shot behind 55-year-old Jack Nicklaus. Wayne Grady was Australia's best at 3 under.
Despite the various looks of anguish and bewilderment, scoring was generally excellent on rain-softened greens with 33 players firing subpar, one of them Jack Nicklaus. He won the last of his 6 Masters titles 9 years ago, and at 55, the fire still burns. The 3 first-round leaders, defending champion Olafable showed the benefit of some hard practice on his short game.
Ho-hum! Eagle 3.
Obviously, those 2 chips in on the back 9 on 12 and 15 help a lot in my round anyway.
There were no chip-ins, but Phil Mickelson still managed an eagle at 13. The Aussies' Greg Norman couldn't keep pace with playing partner Mickelson, and at 1 over, he's 4 strokes adrift of Wayne Grady.
Yeah, very happy. It's just nice to get a start in a tournament like this and get your first round into the books and work from there.
As long as you give yourself a chance coming on the weekend or come Sunday, that's the most important thing.
The smile hides disappointment for Ian Baker Finch. At 7 over, his tournament looks Ian Baker finished. And despite a birdie at 12, world #1 Nick Price came in 4 over, effectively killing his bid for a 3rd straight major.
Zimbabwe is proving the team to beat after 3 days of the Fred Hollows International Run from Bourke to Parramatta in New South Wales. It was a chilly 8 degrees when runners left parks this morning on the 122-kilometre journey to Orange. Although Tanzania made the early pace, the strong Zimbabwean team took over to open up a strong 9-minute margin. Pre-race favourite Kenya came in 2nd, ahead of Tanzania with the Australian team 7th. Tomorrow it looks to be another long, cold day for runners, 132 kilometres from Orange to Lithgow via Bathurst. Time to check Saturday's weather details. And foggy conditions in Hong Kong, rain in Hanoi and Taipei, New Delhi hazy, fine weather for Beijing and Bombay, and mist in Seoul and Tokyo. Storms for Jakarta, Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, Rangoon and Port Moresby. Fine in Manila and Ho Chi Minh City. In Australia, possible showers on Christmas Island, fine for the Cocos Islands. Severe cyclone Chloe, now 130 kilometres northwest of Kuri Bay in Western Australia, is moving south-southeast. Rain heading for Hobart, windy in Canberra, showers expected for Melbourne and Adelaide, a storm for Darwin. Sydney and Brisbane should be fine, but cloudy in Perth. Now let's look again at the main stories in this bulletin. In the southern Philippines, running battles have been reported between troops and Muslim rebels suspected of attacking the town of Ipil earlier this week. In an unprecedented move, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, has expressed grave concerns to China about its activities in the disputed Spratly Islands. And it's been another day of drama in world currency markets, with the Japanese yen breaking a record spanning 50 years to a new high against the American dollar. And that's the news from Australia Television for the moment. I'm Rosemary Church. Bye for now.
Tuesday, cars that